Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the world of DeepSeek today, a Chinese AI chatbot that's been, well, blowing up the tech world lately.
It's been impossible to ignore, hasn't it? One day it was under the radar, the next it's like, bam, shooting up the App Store charts. Millions of downloads already.
It's at 3 million downloads last I checked, and something crazy like 80% of those in just the last week.
Exactly. It's the speed that's really catching everyone off guard, isn't it? It's not just popular, but it's shaking things up, taking on the big guys.
The big guys, you mean like OpenAI, Google, those kinds of names?
Absolutely. Going head to head with them on performance, but here's the real kicker. Doing it all at a fraction of the cost. That's got people talking.
Okay, so I've got this AI disruptor, DeepSeek. But before we get into all that, let's rewind a bit. Where did this thing even come from? It's not like it just appeared out of nowhere.
You'd think it was some Silicon Valley startup or a big university lab, right? But nope. DeepSeek's story is way more interesting than that.
Lay it on us then. What's the origin story?
This might surprise you, but it came from a Chinese quantitative hedge fund.
A hedge fund. Now, that's not something you hear every day.
Right. Talk about unexpected origins. This hedge fund, High Flyer, they're known for using AI in their financial analysis, and apparently they decided to branch out.
So it's like those Wall Street guys who cracked the stock market code decided to create an AI chatbot on the side.
Pretty much. And the mastermind behind both High Flyer and DeepSeek is this guy, Liang Wenfeng. A brilliant mind, really. He's got this vision for China, wants to see them leading the AI race, not just following.
And DeepSeek is his statement, his way of saying, hey, world, China's here to play.
Exactly. But there's another twist to this story, the cost.
Oh, yeah, I saw that figure being thrown around, something like $6 million to develop their DeepSeek R1 model. It sounds a little too good to be true.
There's a lot of skepticism about that number, especially when you consider the hardware involved. These AI models need serious horsepower to train, specialized chips, and they don't come cheap.
So there's this mystery surrounding how they managed to pull it off at that price. Did they find some shortcut? Do they have access to some secret stash of chips?
It's a good question. There are definitely some eyebrows being raised, especially with all the export restrictions around those kinds of chips.
Intriguing. Okay, so we've got this mysterious, potentially cost-effective AI chatbot shaking things up. But let's talk about what it actually does. They have two main models, right? DeepSeek V3 and DeepSeek R1.
Right. V3 is kind of your typical chatbot, similar to what you see with ChatGPT, generating text, summarizing documents, that kind of stuff.
The standard chatbot toolkit, got it.
Yeah.
But then there's R1, the one with all the buzz around its cost and performance. What makes it different?
R1 is designed as a reasoning model, so instead of just giving you the final answer, it shows its work, breaks down the process step by step.
So it's like thinking out loud, showing its logic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just a gimmick. This approach actually makes it more efficient. Because R1 processes information more selectively, it uses less memory, less power, and that translates to lower costs.
Ah, so that's part of the secret sauce, how they're achieving such high performance without breaking the bank. It's not just about brute force computing, it's about clever design.
And that clever design is what's making people sit up and take notice. It's like a wake-up call for the industry. Some are even calling it an AI Sputnik moment.
Ooh, I like that analogy. Like, hey, world, look what we can do, even with fewer resources.
Right. It's challenging the assumption that you need massive budgets and tons of hardware to compete in AI. But how does it actually stack up?
Yeah, how's DeepSeek performing compared to those big names? Are they really delivering on the hype?
Well, DeepSeek R1, that reasoning model, it actually outperforms OpenAI's O1 Mini on several benchmarks, like HelloSwag, that's a test of common sense reasoning, and R1 scores significantly higher.
So it's not just talk. They've got the results to back it up. Impressive. But I think the question on everyone's mind now is it safe to use?
That's the big question, isn't it? You've got performance, affordability, but then you have these concerns about data privacy and security, especially given the whole China connection.
Yeah, there have been some pretty serious warnings, haven't there? Australia's science minister urging caution, the U.S. Navy reportedly banning it outright. And then there are those whispers about DeepSeek potentially using data from OpenAI models to train their own.
It's a lot to unpack, and it raises some really important questions about the future of AI, about data, about who controls this technology, and where it's all heading. Let's dig into those concerns a bit, shall we? Starting with data privacy, that's a big one these days.
Yeah, it feels like every app wants a piece of our data these days, doesn't it? But what's DeepSeek collecting, and how is it different from, say, what Google or Facebook are doing?
Well, like most apps and services, DeepSeek collects the usual stuff, your basic information, name, contact details, that sort of thing. And also some technical stuff, like your IP address.
Okay, makes sense. They need some data to personalize the experience, right? And probably to improve their models.
Right, exactly. Pretty standard practice. But there are a couple of things that set DeepSeek apart.
Hmm. Like what?
First, they're collecting keystroke patterns, which is a little, well, unusual for a chatbot.
Keystroke patterns. So like how fast I type, how often I pause, that sort of thing.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
They say it's for security purposes, but it's definitely raised some privacy concerns.
I can see why. It does sound a bit creepy.
And then there's the second thing, which is probably even more consuming for some people, and that's where all this data is going, where it's stored.
Ah, you mean the fact that it's all going to China. That's what's got a lot of people on edge.
Exactly. Because of China's laws and the government's influence over tech companies, there's this, well, lack of transparency, you might say. We don't really know how that data might be accessed or used.
So even if they're collecting similar types of data as other AI assistants,
Yeah.
the location and the potential for government access is what's raising the red flags.
Exactly. That's the key difference. And then you've got DeepSeek's own privacy policy, which, well, let's just say it doesn't exactly inspire a lot of confidence.
What do you mean? What does it say?
It says they might use data to match you and your actions outside of the service.
Match you and your actions outside of the service. Hold on, what does that even mean?
It's pretty vague, right? It kind of implies they could be tracking your activity on other platforms, maybe even in the real world, and using that to, well, build a more detailed profile of you.
Okay, yeah, that's getting into some pretty murky territory. It feels like a step beyond what you'd expect from a simple chatbot.
It's definitely raised eyebrows among privacy advocates. But, to be fair, we should remember that a lot of Western companies are doing similar things, even if they're not as upfront about it.
Yeah, true. We've all seen those data privacy scandals with Facebook, Google. The list goes on. It's not like the West has a perfect track record here.
Right, it's a broader issue, something we all need to be more aware of, no matter where the company is based. But with DeepSeek, there's this added layer of, geopolitical complexity.
The China factor, right?
Yeah.
Makes everything a bit more sensitive, a bit more loaded.
Exactly. And then there's the censorship issue, which we touched on earlier. DeepSeek seems to steer clear of anything that might be considered, well, politically sensitive by the Chinese government.
Yeah, I read about that BBC interview where they asked DeepSeek about the Tiananmen Square massacre.
Yeah.
And got a very, let's say, diplomatic response.
Exactly. Very generic, avoiding the topic altogether. So it seems like if you ask about anything that might be critical of the Chinese government or touches on sensitive historical events, you're not going to get a straight answer.
Okay, so we've got data privacy concerns, potential government access, censorship. That's a lot. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about security. What are the specific concerns that officials like Australia's science minister and the U.S. Navy are raising?
Australia's science minister, he's basically saying, hey, we need more transparency. He's concerned about the lack of clarity around DeepSeek's data management and privacy practices, wants to know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Makes sense. You'd want some reassurance, especially given the geopolitical context. What about the U.S. Navy's reported ban? What's their reasoning?
It seems their main concern is security risks. They're worried DeepSeek could be used to gather information from their personnel, maybe even spread misinformation, and that's a big no-no in a military context.
So potential espionage or propaganda. That's serious stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got that whole allegation about DeepSeek possibly using data from OpenAI models to train their own. That's a whole other layer of messiness.
Yeah, if that's true, that's a major breach of intellectual property. Could have some serious legal repercussions. It raises questions about their development practices, whether they're playing by the rules.
So it's not just data privacy and censorship. There are potential security threats and legal issues swirling around DeepSeek.
It's a multifaceted issue, and it's important to consider all these aspects when you're thinking about using DeepSeek.
Okay, so we've laid out the concerns, but I'm sure some people are listening and thinking, well, Western companies collect our data too, so what's the big deal? What would you say to that?
It's a fair point, and you're right. Data privacy is an issue across the tech industry, not just with DeepSeek. But the key difference here, the thing that makes people nervous, is the lack of transparency and the potential for government influence, how that data might be used,
So it's not just the data itself, it's who has access to it and how it might be used in ways that we're not aware of or comfortable with.
Exactly, and that's why the concerns around DeepSeek are amplified. It's not just about your personal privacy, it's about national security, the geopolitical implications of a Chinese company potentially having access to all this data.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. It's like DeepSeek has thrown this curveball into the tech world, and no one knows quite how to handle it.
It's definitely shaken things up. And it's raising these big, important questions about the future of AI, data privacy, the balance of power in the tech world. It's all up in the air.
So what's the takeaway here? What should people be thinking about if they're considering using DeepSeek?
I think it comes down to this: approach it with curiosity, but also caution. DeepSeek is undeniably impressive. The capabilities, the affordability, it's exciting. But you have to be aware of the potential risks, especially when it comes to your data, your privacy, your security.
So weigh the benefits against the risks, make an informed decision based on your own comfort level.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the start of the conversation. As AI evolves, as it becomes more integrated into our lives, these issues are only going to become more important, more urgent. It really is a fascinating situation, isn't it? We've been talking about DeepSeek's tech, the performance, the low cost, but then there's this whole other layer, all these concerns about data and security, especially with it being a Chinese company.
It feels like DeepSeek has become a symbol almost of this bigger clash happening in the tech world. The
Yeah.
West is used to calling the shots, but now you got China coming in strong, playing by a different set of rules.
It's a real shift in the landscape, isn't it? And it's forcing the West to take a look in the mirror. We might not like what DeepSeek is doing with data, but are we really that different?
It's a bit hypocritical to point fingers, isn't it? I mean, Google, Facebook, they've had their own share of privacy scandals. It almost feels like giving up your data is the price you pay for using these amazing tools, these services.
It's a trade-off we're making, often without even realizing it. We click accept on those terms and conditions, but do we really know what we're agreeing to? And as AI gets more powerful, those choices we make, they have even bigger consequences.
So how do we navigate this new world? What should we be thinking about as users, as just, everyday people living in this age of AI?
I think the most important thing is to be informed, understand what data is being collected, how it's being used, what it could mean for you. Don't just blindly trust a company or a piece of technology.
Do your research, ask questions, right? Be a smart consumer.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to demand more transparency from these tech companies, whether they're in the East or the West. We need to hold them to a higher standard, make sure they're respecting our privacy, our security.
We have a right to know what's happening with our data.
Yeah.
No more hiding behind vague language or shady practices.
Right, absolutely. And, beyond that, I think it's crucial to have this bigger conversation, a global one, about AI ethics, about how we govern this technology. This isn't just a China problem or a Western problem. This is a human problem.
DeepSeek has brought these issues to the forefront, and it feels like we're at a crossroads. Do we want a world where data is a weapon and control is in the hands of a few, or is there another way?
The choice is ours,
Okay.
but we need to act now while the rules are still being written, while the future of AI is still being shaped.
Well, that's DeepSeek for you. It's a story that's just beginning, really. We've explored its origins, its capabilities, and the serious concerns around data and security. The impact it's having, not just on the tech world, but on geopolitics, on society as a whole.
It's a wake-up call, I think, DeepSeek. It's reminding us that we're entering a new era, an era of incredible possibilities, but also profound challenges. We need to stay informed, stay engaged, and be part of shaping this future together.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore the fascinating, ever-evolving world of technology.